and welcome to another Looney Tunes review video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe to follow my journey to review all 1000 Looney Tunes shorts and give this video a like as well. So this is a review for Hurdy Gurdy Hare, and with me today is my fellow monkey, Manny Cruz. Say hi!
What's up, Doc?
Damn right, I totally agree with you. So we're going to talk about Hurdy Gurdy Hare, released on the 21st of January 1950. It had a blue ribbon reissue sometime in 1962. It's the 579th in the series, and it's directed by Bob McKimson. You can find this on the Looney Tunes Golden Collection Volume 4 DVD set with an audio commentary by the great Paul Dini. He's a very nice guy. Loved meeting him a while back when he came to Melbourne. And it's also in HD on HBO Max, which is what I'm using right now. Now, in case you haven't seen the cartoon, because, you may not have HBO Max or maybe a DVD player, but anyway, in case you haven't seen it, Bugs Bunny is looking for work, where he sees that a hurdy-gurdy is available for sale for cheap. And yes, Manny will correct me very soon about that part. Bugs tries to make money from using the instrument, and which comes with the monkey. But the monkey he has is not doing a good job bringing in the dough, so the monkey ends up complaining to Gruesome Gorilla at a zoo, who then escapes, even though he could have escaped all along, but anyway, we'll put that aside, and he ends up going up against Bugs for the rest of the short.
What's up, Doc?
So according to the Animator breakdown sheet, and I'll have a link in regards to that in the description, the working title was Hurdy Gurdy Hare, which would have been absolutely awful, but that could have been just a little thing that they put in just temporarily until they found something better, and I'm glad they did. Now, this is actually the last short to use the so-called plump Bugs design that McKimson was using for a few years now, and from the next short that he does with Bugs Bunny, What's Up, Doc? Can't wait to do that one. Onwards, he would go on to give Bugs a traditional look once again. There are two references here. So Groucho Marx, there's a reference from him.
I've seen you before. I never forget a face. But in your case, I'll make an exception.
And a reference from Ralph Edwards, who was a TV and radio host and producer.
You devil!
But there's also another reference, Petrillo.
I sure hope Petrillo doesn't hear about this.
What exactly is that Petrillo line? What does it mean?
So, who is Petrillo? And fortunately, I'll explain it to you in a moment, but I highly recommend that you also listen to the audio commentary that Paul Dini did, and he goes into a little bit about Petrillo, but I will also educate these lovely listeners as to who he is. So, he was James Cesar Petrillo. He was the head of the American Federation of Musicians. It's one of the largest unions for musicians in the United States. There's also the American Guild of Musical Artists. I am sadly not a member of both at the moment, but maybe down the road I will be. So, he was mentioned because he was the enemy of recorded music at this time. So, it was uncommon that, it's not every day that we know exactly who's the head of the AFM. But in the 40s, Petrillo was definitely well known in the United States and Canada because he waged a war against recorded music in the 18 years that he served as the head of the union. He was a big proponent of live music, and I understand nothing beats a live performance, whether you're listening to rock or jazz or hip-hop or opera or classical music, but recorded music has been around for the past, let's say, century and a half almost, but he really did not like records and things of that nature in radio. In particular in 1942, so August 1st 1942, he called a strike against all the record companies, or you could say most of the record companies at the time, and all recordings were banned because a lot of musicians that were part of the union, they could not do it. They would be scabs if they were to perform. There were no exceptions whatsoever. The strike, it didn't matter if it was classical music, jazz, whatever, you had to stop. Petrillo did not allow it. The strike lasted 27 months. And when it finally ended in November of 1944, a deal was made to pay royalties on the recordings, but not to the specific musicians. So you're thinking, all right, royalties should go to the people who cut the recordings, things of that nature. Nope. The money went to Petrillo's recording and transcription fund. And some people accuse Petrillo of using that for his own nefarious means. Come on. People who are at the head of a union, unless you're crooked, you're going to do the right thing. And there's my first Simpsons reference for the night. But yeah, a lot of people thought that he was just, trying to line his own pockets with the fund instead of giving it to the people who actually worked on it. And he also had another strike that was shorter than the other one in 1948. And it makes sense considering that this cartoon was in production in 1948. And he once again made the news because he had a 2-year strike followed by another one in 1948. So his name definitely would have been fresh on the minds of people in the United States at the time. And looking into more of his history, there are a lot of pop culture references around that time period of Petrillo, like, oh, can't do this. You can't perform this song unless you get Petrillo's permission. I think there was one from Groucho Marx. I know there was one from Jack Benny. And like even radio shows would have like jingles making fun of Petrillo because of how much of an iron fist and how much he hated recorded music.
Wow, like that's just insane. And it's all for one little seemingly throwaway line in this cartoon. And my editing self probably hates you right now. But anyway, we'll put that aside. So, the title though, Hurdy Gurdy. Now, people today will be wondering, unless they, of course, are a musician, but what is a hurdy gurdy? Like, what's that all about?
So this cartoon is actually slightly incorrect when it comes to the name of the cartoon. I mean, Hurdy Gurdy Hare sounds a lot better than street organ hare. It has a nicer flow to it. A hurdy gurdy is a string instrument that produces sound by a hand crank. And inside the hurdy gurdy is a wheel that has rosin on it, and it rubs against a string. So think of it like a normal violin, viola player would have. The instrument in your hand, you have your bow, you put rosin on the bow, and then you make contact with the string. That's what a hurdy-gurdy is, and a hurdy-gurdy's been around for quite some time, for centuries. I actually saw a hurdy-gurdy, and I got to use one when I was in graduate school when I was taking a review class for music history in my first year of graduate studies. And my professor, who I've mentioned before, Kendra Leonard, she brought in a hurdy-gurdy because we were talking about music from that time period, and we got to actually use it. And yeah, you turn the crank, and it starts to produce a sound. And, the wheel touches the strings, and it produces a sound. But in the cartoon, and another cartoon I can think of is Organ Grinder Swing, a Popeye cartoon from Fleischer Studios. But Bugs is actually using a street organ. So what is a street Gordon? Street Gordon. He's an old friend of mine. A street organ, and what is an organ grinder in particular? So let's start off with organ grinder. An organ grinder is a person who played a street organ, duh. And the street organ itself is an instrument of French-German descent that was an automatic, mechanical mnemonic organ. So, air would travel through the reeds and all the other things inside the organ, and it would make sound, but you would also turn the crank in order to make those sounds. And I know that the older barrels, I have to double check the description, but they were harder to control because you had to change the parts on the inside. But think of it like a player piano. The old player pianos, you would put it on the piano, and then it would have like little holes in it or buttons, or like kind of like when you're reading Braille when the text is lifted, and it's able to play the different strings in the piano. The organ would work in a similar way, so you can change the music, or you could add paper to it to play different songs. There are two different varieties of the street organ. There's a German version and a Dutch version. I'm assuming, based on the size, that Bugs was using the German version of the street organ. And street organs were popular in Europe, but also in the United States, because there was, as if you study the history of the United States, and in particular New York City, there's a huge influx of Italian immigrants in the late 19th century, early 20th century. And in particular, a lot of Italian immigrants would be organ grinders. That's why in cartoons or, films from that time period, for better or for worse, there is a stereotype of an Italian playing a street organ, and they would usually have a little monkey. The monkey itself is a capuchin monkey because they're very clever and very easy to train. And it is a true thing. They were part of the act. And in particular, it's kind of strange that Bugs was able to become an organ grinder by 1948 because it was banned in New York City in 1935, thanks to the mayor at the time, Fiorello LaGuardia. And Anthony, in case you ever come to the United States, and if you come into LaGuardia Airport, it was named after him.
There we
So
are.
there is your New York City / organ grinder history. Good luck with editing.
so that would explain why this quote-unquote hurdy-gurdy, which is not really a hurdy-gurdy, was so
It's
cheap.
a street organ.
Yeah. And there was actually a cartoon called The Organ Grinder done by Harmonizing about, 20 years before this one, give or take.
I forgot about that one, yeah.
So that one is more accurately named. So I guess that's one thing Harmonizing did better than the crop, but anyway. But what about the cartoon itself? A lot of you probably screaming right now. So
talk about the cartoon.
Don't worry, and there is a thing you can always scroll past all our ramblings. But anyway, the cartoon itself. If you look at the newspaper, I'm actually curious, was that a real newspaper where they just pasted that little advertisement over the top? And it sure looks like it, especially in high definition. But if you look really closely, you might find an ad or two that's a bit, let's say, a sign of the time. If you of a certain color, if you get my meaning. You can only apply for certain jobs. Yeah, not good, but it is what it is. But yeah, that's why I think this was just some random newspaper and they just pasted a little thing over the top. Or maybe someone was selling hurdy-gurdy at the time and they got lucky. I don't know. But I think the first thing was more likely. But I just love the idea that bugs can just easily buy monkey. I mean, can you buy monkeys so easily these days, Manny? I mean, it's not like in The Simpsons, I guess. You know, we can claim disability and have a helper monkey, you know.
Pray for Anthony. That's a computer when he's editing my videos.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. You know, and I'll get the monkey to edit the videos anytime you're on, Manny. So, you know, it'll save me a lot of stress. But
it was the blurst of times, you stupid monkey.
Oh, he'll that monkey will probably just reuse the same clip of that monkey smelling his own fart and, you know, fainting. So that's probably all it's going to be in this video. So I apologize for the quality of the editing here. I'm blaming the monkey. I like the wearing the money riff that you hear very briefly, you know, when Bugs realizes he's going to make a lot of money from this scheme.
Ah, here comes the gravy train now. And money, 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 money.
I mentioned this before, but I love McKimson's Bugs, how he's just so naive and childlike in a lot of these.
I like the fact that, you know, like you said, he's kind of naive. He's more of a trickster. I would say he kind of continued the tradition that Clampett. I mean, Clampett's Bugs was a complete wild card, but I enjoy it. I mean, I love the Clampett Bugs cartoons, but he kind of keeps a little bit of that spirit alive. And in particular, I like in this cartoon that he does a ton of asides, and I'm not used to Bugs doing that. You know, breaking the fourth wall, and he's like, you know, acknowledging what's happening in the story, and I'm like, that kind of goes away. I don't really think too often of Bugs doing stuff like that. Maybe I don't remember correctly. I mean, yeah, he'll say things like, you know, his catchphrases, "Ain't I a stinker?" Or, of course, you know, "This means war," but just like Bugs is literally acknowledging the audience and breaking the fourth wall, and he's like, you know, putting his hand to the side, like talking to them. And I thought that was really neat in this cartoon. And I don't know if the McKimson Bugs continues to do that, because some of these shorts I haven't seen in years, but I thought that was really, really cool. I like not only McKimson, but Warren Foster's take on the character.
Yeah, I quite love it too. I love the animation of the monkey explaining to the gorilla who, well, as I mentioned before, could have just escaped the whole time. It's just one of those weird plot points. But, you know, it doesn't mean it's bad or anything. I just think it's like amusing in that way. I mean, what do you think of the animation of that?
Oh, I guess in modern parlance, you would call it meta humor. But, you know, when literally the monkey turns into Bugs Bunny, it's a really funny scene. I mean, I really get a kick out of that. And of course, we have our second appearance of everybody's favorite gruesome gorilla, and his design is a little tweaked. I mean, his eyes aren't as expressive now as opposed to Gorilla My Dreams, which is one of my favorite Bug shorts. But it's always good to hear Mel Blanc. I mean, Mel Blanc, of course, killing it like always, doing the monkey and doing Bugs. But I just love every time he's doing the or whatever, the snarls of gruesome gorilla. It always puts a smile on my face.
Oh, it's so good. But also there's a very cheeky joke that I absolutely love, and it was even called back to later on.
Whoops. Pardon me, I'm sure.
He has to check back in later. Childlike, immature, hilarious.
You naughty, naughty boy from, what was it? Bugs Bunny Gets the Boyd. That's definitely Bugs right there.
Of course. But one weird joke is that balloon joke that we see later on. I absolutely love it. Just, what, so you can just blow your finger and all of a sudden you inflate? Just very random, but...
Could I do the opposite? So, like, I let air out and I lose a few pounds?
Well, you know, unfortunately, if I let air out, the wife kicks me out of the room. But anyway.
Hi-oh.
Oh. But I do like the ladder gag, though. I wonder if that's just a callback from some of the gags that they would have done in the silent era of Hollywood. I quite like that. You know, the whole climbing up the ladder and then ending up at the same place you started from. Now, the Bronx Express, is that a real thing? Because I can see that in the sign where he's clearly landed in the subway, but Is that real today?
Well, I am sadly not an expert on the history of the New York City subway, and I'm waiting for the experts on the subway. But Paul Dini mentions in the commentary that this cartoon it's unique because it's one of the few cartoons that Bugs is in his home city of New York. And when Bugs again acknowledges to the audience, I used to work between Times Square and Grand Central, and I know those locations. I don't go to New York, all the time, but I grew up near New York City, and I was like, you know what? I was trying to remember. I'm like, I know Times Square is on 42nd Street, and of course, Carl Stalling throws in 42nd Street, the music in the background in that scene, which I get a kick out of. And I was thinking, I'm like, Grand Central, I don't go there too often, but I was trying to remember the proximity of those two places. So I went on Google, and I don't know about 1948 on what specific train in the subway you would have to take, but if you were to go from Times Square to Grand Central, you would take the 7 train if you ever go to the New York subway. But what's strange is it says Bronx Express, but Bronx, this cartoon, I'm assuming is based on the fact that Bugs talks about Times Square and Grand Central, and you see Central Park in this cartoon. That this cartoon is set in the borough of Manhattan, but the train is going through the Bronx Express, which brings you north because the Bronx is north of Manhattan. And if you were to go from Times Square to Grand Central, it would bring you east towards Queens. The modern 7 train brings you to the borough of Queens. Maybe I'm overthinking it too much. Bugs is saying that, I used to work there. But yeah, I guess it would make sense because, you would have a Manhattan-bound train going northward towards the Bronx to go see the Yankees because the Yankees were playing in the Bronx Yankee Stadium's in the Bronx. And if I was going to say the Mets, but this cartoon was made in 1948. And the Mets didn't exist yet. This was back in the time of the Yankees, the Dodgers, and the Giants before the Dodgers and the Giants moved to California. Look at that, little baseball trivia.
There we go. But I like the violin gag, and that seems to be a precursor to Hillbilly Hare, which I cannot wait to cover on this channel. It's one of my favorite shorts of all time. But I love the animation there. I believe you said it was Emery Hawkins.
Yeah, I don't like guessing when it comes to animation because I don't have an eye for it, But, I mean, there's certain people that's pretty easy to recognize their animation. But when Bug starts playing the violin, I was looking at it, I'm like, doing some logical thinking. I was like, well, Emery Hawkins is one of his animators. This is before I paid attention to the credits. But I could recognize Emery Hawkins' animation now. And I was like, yeah, that kind of looks like Emery Hawkins. And then I listened to the commentary from Paul Dini, and then he confirmed it. I was like, yay, I can recognize animators. And I gave myself an imaginary gold star, and I was happy.
Beautiful. The ending, though, is a bit weird because you've got, of course, the gorillas making big success for Bugs, but why is a little monkey there? Was there like a missing scene that they kiss and make up?
Money makes everybody become friends.
That's right, and money heals all wounds.
Amen.
All right, so Manny, the music,
it's time for Manny's music time with man, I sound like crap today. The music trivia for you today. Keep that. That's a beautiful
professional singer, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, spending thousands of money. I don't spend one money. I spend $1,000 money. $20. What's wrong with me tonight, man? You got to keep all this. Is great. All right, so Manny's music time, part 9,000. It's over 9,000. Dragon Ball reference. That's for you, Huey. Obviously, the cartoon is based off a musical instrument and, the organ grinder profession itself. But there were a few musical things that I thought were really, really neat. So for starters, in the beginning of the cartoon, in the title, you hear the song Animal Fair, and that song is played throughout the cartoon. Of course, when you see Central Park, you hear 42nd Street. From Harry Warren, who I've talked about before in one of my other commentaries. And you're going to hear 42nd Street again in the whole subway scene.
Okay, push in. Plenty of room in the center of the car. Push in. Plenty of room. Push in. I used to wake on the shuttle from Times Square to Grand Central.
In the part where Bugs is talking about the old masters. The old masters, Beethoven, Brahms, and Bach. Obviously, Beethoven, Brahms, and Bach. I never noticed this until this recent rewatch. When Bugs is, of course, butchering the names of these composers, you hear Carl Stalling throw in 3 little excerpts of their music. So for Beethoven, it was his Minuet in G.
Beethoven.
For Brahms, Johannes Brahms, it was his cradle song, better known as, the lullaby.
Brahms.
And for Bach, you hear a little bit, or Bach, you hear a little bit of his toccata and fugue in D minor. And whenever I say the name of that piece, people are like, "What?" And then I go, the music that you hear at a haunted house or a vampire? Oh, that song. Yes, that's the real name, toccata and fugue in D minor.
Batch.
Your favorite scene that you mentioned before, the gravy train, you hear a little bit of "We're in the money." Now, the main theme of the street organ itself is a piece of music. It's a waltz from the waltz king Johann Strauss II. It was written in 1867, and the name of it in German is a Künstlerleben, which translates to an artist's life. Now, this particular song and the melody, da, 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 you hear it throughout the cartoon. And he wrote this particular waltz a little while after the success of An der schönen blauen Donau, or in English, by the beautiful blue Danube. So this was his follow-up hit to his number one single, The Blue Danube. No, of course, the Billboard Hot 100 didn't exist back then.
It didn't?
Bugs, unless Doc Brown got the DeLorean to go back to that time period. Back to the Future reference. When Bugs starts taking over for the monkey, you hear a little bit of the song The Merry Carousel. This is one of my favorite excerpts to hear in a Warner Brothers cartoon. I never get tired of the song, but when Bug starts tricking Gruesome Gorilla to bounce on I guess that's an awning. I forget what they call those things. But when they bounce through the awning, and then when Gruesome collapses through the awning, you hear a little bit of She Was an Acrobat's Daughter.
This.
I love that song. And like I said before, you hear 40 seconds. It's cool. Like, he goes immediately from She Was an Acrobat's Daughter, and then right when Gruesome collapses into the subway, that's when you start hearing the little excerpt, 42nd Street. But yeah, there was just a lot of really neat little musical excerpts in here. And yeah, it's been a while since I've seen this cartoon, but the fact that it's, I love early McKimson, and I like Gruesome Gorilla. A lot of cool music, and the whole it's a nice little love letter to New York in the 40s. And whenever I see cartoons like this, I always think, because my grandparents emigrated from Cuba to the United States around this time in the 40s, late 40s, and my grandparents moved from Cuba to New York City. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, were my grandparents looking at a talking rabbit fight a really overgrown crazy gorilla, and see him use an organ? I don't know. I think these things at night, and yeah, I need therapy.
That's why.
But anyway, that's
why you have trouble sleeping.
Yes, exactly. Because I'm thinking about my grandparents running away from a rabbit and a gorilla.
Well, yeah, of course. What else would you think about? Paying bills? Nah. Just do what Bugs does and get yourself, the quote unquote hurdy gurdy, or in other words, an organ grinder and a monkey, and make your money, An organ,
they call the hurdy gurdy an organ grinder. Come on, you know what I'm going to say. I hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
Yeah, exactly right. So as for the rating, I'm giving this one a solid 8.5 out of 10. It's a really funny cartoon, even if some of it doesn't make any sense, but whatever, who cares? It's still funny. And it's just chock full of wonderful moments that just made me smile from start to finish. What about you? What would you rate this one?
Maybe slightly lower. I mean, it's a really funny cartoon. I enjoyed the animation. All the stuff I was talking about before, I give it 8 out of 10.
Yeah, it's a solid cartoon. Maybe not the best, but it's still a pretty good one to revisit from time to time. So that'll do it for this one. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, take care.
And I really, really, really hope Petrillo doesn't get on our case for this.
This kid sure loves music. That gives me an idea. I sure hope Petrillo doesn't hear about this.